14, 1979. I'm talking with Pearl Shonfield at her home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Ms. Shonfield, I'd like to begin by having you tell me what you can recall about your husband's family. How did they happen to get to Muncie? We can use that as a starting point for our conversation here today.
The grandparents, whose names were Rudolph and Rachel Shonfield, had a small factory, as I understand, at many, many years ago in Muncie. I don't know, I think it was a dress manufacturing business. I don't remember what Ray told me it was. Then his parents came there, and they went to school there. His father went to the Jefferson School, which is a very old school. I don't know whether it's still in existence. And my husband went to the Jefferson School, and which was the grade school there. After they were there for a while, my father-in-law went into business with a brother-in-law in Columbus, Indiana, in a men's clothing business. And he was there for a short time, and that's where my husband, Ray Shonfield, was born. And then shortly afterwards, they moved to Muncie. And he lived all of his life in Muncie until he went into the music business. And before he even graduated from high school, went to Cuba with a group called the Riley Orchestra, which played in many different places, and it was a group of high school kids. And this Riley took almost all the money away from these children, and they played for him because they loved music. And from there, my husband went into bigger things in the music business. And then finally, when we got married, he went back to Muncie and went into business with his father, and had the Muncie, had the Shonfield's clothing store.
Was that downtown on Walnut
First
Street?
opening up on Main Street, West Main Street. I think it was, I don't remember what number, about the 100 West Main Street. And then from there went into bigger things, and I think it was 109 South Walnut Street. And then there was a Western Union shop next to that, and on the other side was a shoe store called Cooper's, I forget the name of the shoe store. It was Buster Brown Shoe Store, right next door to it. These buildings were owned by Weiser Marsh there, with whom my parents were very good friends, and they rented from them all their lives while they were there. And they had a nice communication between the two families. Now, when my father-in-law had the business on West Main Street, he rented from a man by the name of Sam Gold, who is Edith Garfield. Her name was Edith Garfinkel at that time. Edith Garfield's father, who came from the old country and who was a shrewd businessman and bought up most of Muncie. He's a very, very rich man and left his children lots and lots of money. Those people who came from those other countries, Poland, Russia, and many of those others, were shrewder and smarter than these German Jewish people who were so wonderful that they looked down upon these people, but they were not money-making people.
So the German Jewish people were among the religious, or the first settlers in this religious community. The first
settlers.
But then they tended socially to look down on the
very much so. I can remember my husband's aunts and all, just never thought any of the people who came there were just good enough for them to associate.
The ones from Central Europe.
Which is ridiculous. But this is the way it was in Muncie.
How did your father-in-law and your husband happen to get into the clothing business?
My father-in-law was in the clothing business many, many years before the First World War and made quite a bit of money. What at that time was quite a bit of money. When he made that money, he decided he was going to retire and sit on the porch and rock. And he sold his business to a man by the name of Sam Ringgold, who also made a lot of money there. And my father-in-law was out of business for a number of years then until we got married in 1930. And then he helped my husband go into business again, into the men's clothing business, and stayed in the store with him.
What kind of store was this? What kind of clientele did they?
Very nice, very good. Carried the nicest merchandise, and my husband was a very, 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 very highly respected citizen there. I mean, he was a man who, I have a lot of articles about him.
Everybody knows, everyone I've talked to is always.
He was a man who started the Salk vaccine and did everything for the polio organization for years. He gave up his store, he gave up everything to work for that, and going into the different schools with doctors to give the original, well, I have articles on this that tell that everybody came to him to get these articles about him. Everyone from the newspapers for all the different things he did. I think this is the polio vaccine planned here for 8,000. That was one of the first ones. That was in March 22nd, 1955. The National Foundation for Infantile Trials used the March of Dimes Fund to purchase enough vaccine to help manufacture and so forth and so on. Let's see. But whenever they wanted to know anything, they would come to my husband because he was the one that was the head of it. It says, Ray Shonfield, treasurer of the local chapter, reported Tuesday that Delaware County's polio team is ready to go pending the arrival of a new vaccine. The kickoff for mass inoculation here depends on whether or not officials at the research center change their recommendations to how the vaccine should be given. I mean, I was teaching then. The people didn't want their children to have this vaccine.
Oh, I know. There was
they were scared to death.
A lot of people were
This
against
was one of the articles written.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Here's another one written by Dick Green. I don't know whether he's still living there.
Yes, he's still there.
Is he?
He's still writing a column about Muncie's past.
Well, almost every article that's in here has my husband's name in it. It says here something about, this was just something about a Lions Club, and it says Dick Green passed him and said the ballyhoo over the public address system was being carried on by Ray Shonfield, and ended each outburst with a roar and so forth and so on. But all these articles are about my husband.
Oh, that's very nice.
Every single. When they wanted to do anything downtown for the business district, it was my husband who did it. And his picture was always in it.
So he was very much interested in developing the business area of Muncie.
This was what his life was. Not only business, he was on the mission board. He was on the Red Cross board. He was on the what else? Mission board, Red Cross board. What else here? Visiting Nurse Association board. I can't remember. There's so many articles written here about him. Every article in the press of things, almost every day, had his name written up in it. Something about him. Like you to meet Ray Shonfield and his father Lou, Muncie's Dean of Merchants, old family here. I mean, just almost every article that was written had his name in it. Then this is a silly one that Evans Owens wrote. about the whole article is about Ray, my husband. That was the same word, Ray. Serious? They're talking about the starlings at the courthouse. That was the same word Ray Shonfield used in describing the condition of the courthouse yard the other day. And then this whole article here, which I wouldn't read to you, from there on down, is about Ray. Here's another one written by Evan Owens about the announcement of the success of the South vaccine, and Ray's name.
So he certainly played a major part in the Salk vaccine
everything
campaign.
Was everything was in it. He was in the whole. He was on the TV. He was on. But these are the things I can tell you about him. I can't tell. Here's an old article that I saved from, that must date back to 1860, that he had in one of his books. This is when he gave the first shot at one of the schools, and the doctor was Dr. Oh, I think he's...
I've seen Dr. McDowell's name mentioned in here.
Yes, but...
Dr. Stanley was the health officer.
Here's the opening of the temple there. Let's see what it says. Here's the cornerstone laying of the Bethel Temple. And, of course, it gives the names of people who are
valuable historical material here.
And I have a lot of things, but most of the things are about him and nobody else. And as I said, my friends, I belong to a bridge club of 12 women. I was the only Jewish woman there. I hear regularly from people, not from Jewish people, but from my friends. I don't know whether you know Swain Russey, who was the president of the whole Warner Gear Corporation throughout the country at one time. Started by being president in Muncie, and then throughout the country. Well, they were our next door, they were our friends. These are the people that I still hear from there. I don't hear from any Jewish people.
Well, as far as your, not only your generation, but the generation of Mr. Shonfield's parents, what involvement did they have in the Jewish community? I'd like you to take two generations there, both your life...
They were involved. The whole family, there was an Amelia Shonfield. My daughter is named after her, and she married a Wolf who had a store there. I think I gave you a little article about that store. And they were involved. They gave the Torahs. I don't know whether you know what that is.
Yes, I do.
To the temple. They gave the two great big chairs that are standing there in the temple to the temple. They have windows in the temple with names of Wolf and different ones on it that gave money to help it make a reformed temple. Then people came in like the Golds and another group of people you are going to talk to Mrs. Garfield. She called me today and she wanted me to meet with her. I said, I couldn't meet with you because our viewpoints would be different. They wouldn't belong to our temple. They wanted it changed. They didn't pay anything or anything to the temple because they wanted it to be an Orthodox community. And whether it was Orthodox or Reformed, who gave a damn what it was? That part is so superficial. It doesn't make any difference what kind of community. If you are religious and you believe in being a good Jew, you're a good Jew. So it doesn't make any difference what group you belong to.
So there were different viewpoints when these new people came.
Very bad. There was a lot of friction that went on for a while. This dates back to maybe 1929, 1928, when these people came there. There was a family by the name of Dobro, or Dobrowitz, I don't remember, who wanted it to be. And these people did not want to come to a Reformed temple. They wanted it to be Orthodox. Then,
did they try to get the temple to change?
Oh, yes. Yes,
But this was not successful?
Never. That was a Reform temple built by these people who are Reformed Jews, and they would never let it change. And I don't know how it is now.
It's still Reformed. It's not been changed, I don't think, very much from what the people who founded it in the 1920s wanted it to be.
Yes.
Did the Jewish community, as far as your generation and the generation of your in-laws, did they do a lot of things together as a Jewish community?
Oh, yes.
What sorts of things?
Together, they had what originally was called, that was before my time there, a Jewish Aid Society. That's what they called it. Eventually, it became the Sisterhood. And they worked. And when I came there and worked in the community, we'd go down to the temple and put on big dinners for 50, 75 people, and with our own, we had no one to help us. We washed the dishes, we made the food, we did everything down there in order to try to make that community be successful. There weren't many people who could give a lot of money.
Oh, is that because there weren't a lot of people with a lot of money to spare?
I suppose that was true.
Well, as you look back at that, would you call the Jewish community in Muncie that you knew a wealthy community? You wouldn't say that.
No, I wouldn't.
So,
no,
so the temple never had a lot of income. It never had a lot of money to play around with.
It didn't. It has more now because there are Jewish families like Martin Schwartz's family who came in and were successful. Martin went into his father's business and he was successful. Bernard Freund inherited all of his money from his father. He graduated as a lawyer, never practiced law one day. He went into his father's business and managed his father's business. What other family can I tell you about there?
So there are a lot of people in the next generation then, such as Martin Schwartz, who stepped into businesses already established.
And he made it grow. Bernard Freund, who is a very brilliant man, these people were very, very hard on our rabbis there that came in. As I say, we first had a Tri-City rabbi called Rabbi Freund. And then we had a rabbi, he married my children, I ought to remember his name.
Well, I could check that.
Well, anyway, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But many of the people who were very intelligent people, like Marty and Bernard, made life miserable for these rabbis.
Why was that?
I don't know.
I mean, were these full-time rabbis at that point?
Full-time.
Yet these were all Reformed people. It wasn't the conflict you mentioned before between the Orthodox and the Reformed.
No.
So you can't think of any reason why that might have been. I've not heard of it.
They probably felt that they just weren't smart enough for them, I guess. Or their viewpoints differed, and they felt like their wives ought to get in there and work too for the community, the rabbis' wives and all. Some of the rabbis' wives couldn't do it, and there was a lot of friction, and I didn't like it.
What's your background? We talk mostly about your husband. Where are you from?
I am from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was born there.
Born and raised in Fort Wayne.
I taught school there.
Where did you go to college?
First year I came here when I was 16 years old to a school that is not in existence called Madam Blaker School for Girls, which later affiliated with Butler University because Madam Blaker died. She was an old-time teacher that started the kindergartens in our state. And we had chapel every morning, and she preached, there is no such thing as a bad child. And we sang all the songs, and every morning we were expected to go to chapel. Well, when she died that year, I changed and went to what is now called Eastern, I think it's Michigan Eastern College. It was Ypsilanti, Michigan. It was called Ypsilanti State Normal at that time, or Michigan State Normal at that time. I went for 1 year. I came from a very poor family. There were 9 children in our family. And 2 years of college, my brothers went for 6 and 8 years because they were doctors, and my family believed in the boys getting all the education. My one sister went to Western Reserve University for a year and went to Michigan for a year. I went with practically nothing to these 2 schools. My brothers and sisters helped me get 2 years of education, and then I went into Harrison Hill School in Fort Wayne and taught for 2 years, and then I got married.
When did you, or I should say, where did you meet Mr. Shonfield?
I came here for a teacher's convention, and he was playing in a band called Charlie Davis's Band, and I saw him and I was only 17, and I saw him on the stage, and I said, I want him for my husband.
Well, you didn't know he was Jewish at that time, did you?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
And I just fell deeply in love with him right away, and we were married. I taught for 2 years, and he quit the music business. He was a very artistic man, and it was my family's fault that he gave up his artistic ability, because they frowned upon anyone that played in a band.
What was his instrument? What was his specialty?
Clarinet and saxophone. He played in the Muncie Symphony for a while. Hargraves isn't there anymore.
Yes, he's still there.
Is he still there?
Yeah.
Well, he knows Ray so well. Oh, sure.
Yeah, Bob still got a couple of years to go.
Most of the professors that I know, Dr. Farrell isn't still there.
Yep, he is. Just had
He's
coffee
still teaching?
I had coffee with him this morning.
Well, see, Dr. Farrell and all of us were all dear friends. I was friendly with all of the professors at that time, and so was Ray. We were very close. We lived right there on Petty Road, right a block from the college.
Oh, yes, I know that area.
And I'd walk through when I took my extra credits, walked over to the college, and when my children were in high school, I tried to get a few more credits until finally I could get a master's. And then I went a little further. Is Hicks still there? She helped me in French.
She's retiring. Yeah,
is she?
Georgina Hicks.
Well, she and I were very good friends, and there were so many. Of course, most of them aren't there anymore. There was a Dr. Hummel that I dearly loved, and Dr. Howick that I just loved in the science department, who helped me so much. And most of those people aren't there anymore.
No, that's right. They're all names of dormitories.
They're gone.
Yeah, that's right. They named a lot of the residence halls after some
I'm
of the
surprised
professors.
Dr. Farrell was still there.
Oh, yes. He has about...
Everett Farrell?
He has about
was
4
having
more
a little
years.
difficulty at the time with the Ball State... And Dr. Burkhart lived right in back of me.
Yeah, of course he's still
And of course he and I were very good, and his whole family were all good friends. And Dr. Burkhart worked for years with my brother. See, my brother was the head of the geriatrics department through the state. My brother, Dr. Salin. And in fact, I can give you an article about him. He has a place close to town, and they gave money for it, where they're going on with this field in geriatrics, and it was through my brother that they have done this. And there was a big article written in the Indianapolis paper about him after he died, which shows the kind of work that he did.
That is indeed very interesting. So you come from a very talented family.
A talented family, a very poor family.
What did your father do?
He was in the upholstery and a furniture business.
In Fort Wayne?
In Fort Wayne.
Well, you've talked about many of the fine relationships that you and your husband had with both people within the Jewish community and outside the Jewish community. Was that also true of your, or I should say of Mr. Schonfeld's parents' generation?
Oh, yes. Yes, very well known. People like the Balls. The Balls bought a lot of their furniture when they had the old antiques, that came from Europe that those people wanted. Agnes Ball lives here now, and Bill Ball. But these were all people that they were, that they knew, that they were friendly with.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that at some point you began to have many more relationships outside of the Jewish community than within the Jewish community.
Yes.
Is there a particular reason for that?
Yes. When I first came to Muncie, there was a different class of Jewish people there, the kind that I could communicate with. After I was there a while, different people came in with whom I could not communicate. They were people who made a lot of money. I could name their names, but I don't want you to have it on tape.
Mm-hmm.
But they were not my kind. They were not the kind of people I enjoyed being with.
Are there specific reasons for that? Cultural interests, educational interests?
Cultural, educational, their viewpoints about things that I didn't like. So I was a teacher. I went with a lot of teachers there. Today, I go with a group of 12 teachers every Monday from here that I meet with. I'm the only Jewish one. They are people who give travelogue talks here, who are very educated, who are much younger than I. I am 70 years old. These other people are all in their 40s and 50s. But I still belong with them, and I enjoy their company. They keep me up on the things that I need to be kept up on, because I am not kept up on things until I am with them.
Did you teach in Muncie as well?
I taught in Muncie.
Where did you teach in Muncie?
I taught in the Emerson School. I taught at Garfield School.
You did? That's where my wife teaches.
Taught in 2 schools there.
Then you came to Indianapolis in what year?
63. And at that time, I was on a pretty high salary schedule, and it was very hard to get work at that time because they weren't hiring teachers. And I was very fortunate to get a position here. I taught at the Grandview School for 8 years. And my husband became very sick, and I quit.
So your husband was here with you in Indianapolis?
Oh, yes.
Well, so you both came here in 1963. What year did he pass away?
Let's see. 7 years ago.
Maybe 72.
Yes.
1972. A number of people I've talked to have commented at some length on the fact that there were some elements of anti-Semitism in Muncie.
Very much so.
Can you remember any specific instances?
Very much so. We were supposed to buy a lot from a Mr. Doding in Muncie that was not in Westwood, but in the other area that's...
Gatewood? Kenmore?
Kenmore.
Kenmore edition.
The whole thing went through. We had it all signed and everything. There was a Charles Bender there at that time who would not let Jews come into Kenmore. And we had everything all signed. The lot was bought. We had all the plans made with our builder and everything, and he took it all. They would not let Jews at one time come into the Fort Wayne Country Club.
That was true of Delaware Country Club, too?
That was the Delaware Country Club.
Okay, I thought you mentioned Fort Wayne.
I'm sorry.
You mean the Delaware Country Club?
I meant the Delaware Country Club. No, the Fort Wayne Country Club took the Jews, and my family belonged there.
So as you look at Muncie, you really think that
there was a Court Asher there.
Yeah, the editor of the X-ray paper.
Who used to throw the circulars down. We'd pick them up from our store every day or every week against the Jews. Roosevelt was a Jew. according to his papers. He wrote everything that was terrible about the Jewish, anything, and all of it was not, most of it, I would say all of it was not true. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was a fanatic.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of other people.
Court Asher.
Yeah.
I don't know where he is now. I don't know whether he's still living.
Well, he's not writing anti-Semitic papers. I know that. I think he's dead. I haven't heard anything about him for quite a time. There was a student at Ball State a few years back who wrote a doctoral dissertation on Court Asher and the X-ray paper. But I also have had a number of other people who I've interviewed as part of this project mention his virulent anti-Semitism. And they've also commented on the housing situation and on the Delaware Country Club as well.
Well, yes, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. A lot of it.
Would you consider, as you look back on raising your family in Muncie, Indiana, that Jewish values were very important in your family?
Not any. For one thing, I myself am an agnostic. I was in Fort Wayne when I was growing up. None of my family is that way there. My children never went with any Jewish people. The first time my son had a date with a Jewish girl is when he went to Indiana University. The first time that my daughter had a date with a Jewish boy is when she went to the University of Colorado. Now that's pretty bad.
How about your husband? Was he very committed to Jewish values and the Reformed Judaism?
No.
Okay. But yet you were both active in the temple.
Yes. But the things that are important in Judaism, having Judaism in your home, lighting your candles on Friday night, knowing that there is a Passover, observing these things, we never had in the Shonfield family, which was too bad.
Well, do you regret that now that you look back on it?
I don't regret it, but I think that the people that, for instance, my family in Fort Wayne and all, and most of the people in Muncie probably thought it was terrible. We just didn't grow up that way.
Are your children very observant now, or do they?
My daughter completely is very observant. Although she doesn't observe she goes to temple, let me say that, and she goes with Jewish people. I don't know how much Judaism she has in her home. She married her husband came from a very Jewish, Orthodox family.
Well, that may have something to do with the fact.
Yes.
But you were, as you pointed out to me, and as other people have said, very active in groups like the Sisterhood.
Oh, yes, I was. Others. I was president sister. I was secretary and treasurer. But most of my time was spent as a treasurer and director of the Ball State Auxiliary. And all the articles in the paper about me and pictures are about that. And about the Red Cross. And about other things in the community outside of, and not the Jewish.
Well, would you say then that your role as an active member of the Muncie community was more significant outside the Jewish community?
I think so. I think this helped.
Do you think that's true of your husband's role in the community too?
I think this was a big thing, a very big thing. He was known by everybody in Muncie, everyone in the both political groups. Although we were Democrats, he was known in both in the Chamber of Commerce. He was active. Everybody had a deep respect for him. He was a very, very fine person, and everybody knew that.
So his role in the community then was one that incorporated a very large number of people who were Gentiles.
Mostly.
Particularly, as you've pointed out in the several articles you've given me to look at, in the campaign to have people use the Salk vaccine.
Oh, yes.
When it first came out.
Oh, yeah. He worked on all of things like that. Those are the things that meant the most to him. And we would go together to see these people in their iron lungs, and both of us, and we saw to it that through Ray, it was that these people, youngsters, would have teachers come out and help them with just their heads sticking out of iron lung, and what they're getting their education that way. And Ray saw to it that this was all paid for through the Polio Foundation. He did get some criticism by helping people, one particular family who was in the jewelry business, whom I will not mention their names either, and he gave money to them. But he didn't restrict it. He felt like as long as there was a Polio Foundation and he was working for these funds, he was on this TV, morning, he gave up his business. We were poor people. He had no business being away from the store all the time. This was his life. This is what meant more to him than anything else.
But it's a contribution.
The community.
But it's a lasting contribution.
Yes, it was.
I mean, because of what he did, as you point out with the iron lungs, a lot of people aren't in iron lungs today because of his bringing the availability of Salk vaccine to that community. How did he happen to get interested in that particular campaign? Is there a specific reason?
People ask him to. There was a man by the name of Joe Broderick, lived in Westwood, very well known and extremely wealthy man, would come to Ray, and different people like that would come to my husband and ask him to do things like that, and he always said yes.
So he was willing to give of himself.
Oh, yes, he always did.
Do you consider yourself to be the same kind of person?
No.
As far as, you don't think you're as much of a giving person?
No.
Yet you taught school.
I taught school because I had to.
Well, now,
I loved it. I was considered a very fine teacher, both in Indianapolis and in Muncie. But I had to teach school. And I not only taught school, I worked in the treasurer's office. When my children were small, I worked because I had to help my husband.
You're talking now about financial reasons.
That's right. And that's why I went into school teaching business, because I had to make more money to help my family have a beautiful home and to go with the kind of people that they went with, who were at that time the so-called best people in Muncie, in Westwood.
Right.
Great, great, wonderful people.
But the best people.
There.
So-called.
That's all.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all.
Well, let me ask you one last question of a kind of reflective sort. What do you think the future of small Jewish communities in towns like Muncie is, as you look back on the years that you spent there?
I don't know. I really don't think the future is too bright. I may be wrong.
Is there a specific reason why you don't think it's too bright?
There aren't enough people there. Now, I think Martin Schwartz would work for it. I think Bernard Friend would work for it. But the rest of the people, there's some moneyed people, and I will not tell you their names, that I always look down upon, who are the extremely wealthy people now in Muncie, that I don't think would care whether anything was carried on in the right way or not. They came from other communities. They came from other big cities. Some of them came from the east. And we Midwestern people always thought we were different. And we were. And a lot of them we didn't accept.
Well, I'm sure there
but
are still...
as far as that's concerned, I could see that same anti-Semitism when I've traveled, since my husband has died, all over the world now. When I was in Vienna, I tell you, I never saw such terrible anti-Semitism in my life as there is right there.
This is now, today.
Today. I went to the Jewish places there. I went to the old people's home there. The old people's home was guarded with soldiers, Vienna soldiers. I went to the temple there. It was all covered up, camouflaged. You couldn't tell it was a temple. They didn't want it known. I went to Yugoslavia, of course. It was communistic. It was the same. A Catholic man took us to the temple and told us about everything and said there's nothing but anti-Semitism. There isn't a Jewish family in Dubrovnik. Not one.
That's amazing. But not surprising considering what went on during World War II.
Yes. Yes. It makes me sick to think about how things are over there.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to go back to Germany.
Oh, I think that most people would share that view. I don't think they would either.
Mm-mm.
Look at the reactions been written up in the papers recently to the showing of Holocaust on German television.
Yes. Uh-huh.
People would rather forget things like that or pretend they didn't exist.
And yet the people who went through that said it was so much worse than what it was portrayed on TV.
Sure. Oh, well, you can't portray that kind of horror on television.
No.
Bad as it may have appeared in that film. Well, I want to thank you for taking your time to talk with me.
Welcome. I don't think I've helped you.
Well, I think you have.
No, I don't think I have because I don't think I was active enough in the Jewish community there.
Well, but you have a perspective that I think is an important one. And when you do an oral history project like this one, you want to get as many different perspectives as you can. You don't want just the views of a Martin Schwartz or a Bernard Friend. You also want the views of people who were part of the community but had a different view of it. This has been Warren Vanderhill talking with Pearl Shonfield at her home in Indianapolis, Indiana on Monday, May 14, 1979.